here at Wounded Knee on the Pine Ridge Sioux Indian Reservation, also known as Prisoner of War Camp 44. And here's the mass grave of the people who were massacred here at Wounded Knee in 1890. The massacre, of course, is well known among all American Indian people, especially of the United States of America, as the signature event of Indian history with the government of the United States. Chief Bigfoot and his people who came here unarmed, running for safety from the military, but they were stopped by the 7th Cavalry. The day before Christmas, they were brought down here. They were brought in from over those hills there, and they were camped along. This was a creek then. It's all dried up now, but they put a Hotchkiss gun up there on that hill. You know, the Hotchkiss guns fired rounds about like a .50 caliber. They put them up on the hills over there and up over here. See, then there were no trees, just brush. And they put a Hotchkiss gun right here. And when the order came, they massacred men, women, and children. Over 300. Then after they mowed most of them down, then the cavalry rode in with their sabers and their pistols, finished the job of the women and children and old people down in those ravines and down by the creek. And it was indiscriminate. They used sabers on babies and women. They loved to come along and hack. It was pretty gruesome. Pretty gruesome. Of course, we got the eyewitness stories in detail from the survivors. Bigfoot, ironically, was running to keep his people safe from the cavalry, and they were all killed instead. This ground is consecrated with our blood. Back in the 1800s, our first contact with whites were French fur trappers and traders. And then a few Scotsmen came in and others, and established trading posts in different areas of our country. That was okay. We got along with everybody. There's room. This is a vast land. There's room for everyone, we thought. And then, to short circuit that, you know, we met government officials prior to our war. But then they found gold in Montana. So the shortcut was right across our land. Well, we didn't mind. People were passing through. Good, you know. There was only one instance of an Indian attack on a wagon train. And all they did was run off the oxen. And what happened was that wagon train was approached by these Indian people. I think they're Pawnees. And they asked for two oxen. And they were chased off with guns and insulted. And so the Pawnees said, all right, you wouldn't pay the toll, we're going to take all your oxen. And they did. That's the only instance, recorded instance, of any confrontation between Indians and wagon trains. But the mythology says otherwise. But then the Army, at the insistence of itself, started building forts along what was called the Bozeman Trail. That was the trail to the gold fields. Well, that was going too far. That was contrary to what the United States of America had already promised, and it was contrary to, it disturbed our land. And they didn't have ownership. So we went to war, and we won. The result was the 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty, and the United States agreed to all our demands, every one of them, and left. They got as far as Chicago, and then they changed some of the treaty. They kind of took about 1/3 of our land away. All of what was in now the state of Nebraska. They cut that because Nebraska was about to become a state. So they cut that portion off in Chicago. Went on to Washington, D.C. The treaty was ratified by the Senate and proclaimed by the president, the then president. So these unruly Sioux people, these Sioux Indians, we got to do something about them. So they embarked on the war of attrition on our food source. And here's a staggering statistic that is fact, anthropological and historical fact. At the coming of the white man to the Great Plains, there were estimated approximately 60 million buffalo, a southern herd and a northern herd, that grazed the Serengeti of the North America, which is the Plains states into Canada. That whole area was a vast migration of natural animals. 60 million buffalo. 60 years later, this was at the beginning of the 1800s. 60 years later, there were 200 and some odd left. That's 1 million a year killed. That kind of devastation is unknown anywhere else in the world. And that's one of the legacies of the United States of America. And that's what got the Plains Indians to acquiesce. Not just the buffalo, but all that migration that represented a food source, a shelter factory for hides and clothing, and medicine. I mean, real medicine. All of that slaughtered. Because along with the 60 million buffalo and millions of antelope, millions of deer, millions of all types of birds in our gardens, unbeknownst to almost everybody except the experts, the anthros and the archies and the hissies, you know, the Plains Indians planted food. We had farms, we had gardens. It was that simple. It was real easy to grow things. So then we had to come into the reservations. We were starved into it. Literally starved into it. But when we came in with pride and dignity. Even though we had been logistically defeated rather than militarily defeated. We became dependent because our food source was gone on handouts from the federal government, starvation rations. And because of the demoralization of that fact, and the fact that our women were regularly raped, we still stood up. But then the last of the leaders started to come in because they really had no place to go or nothing to eat. Sitting Bull came in with most of his people. Some of his people refused to come in. They still live in where they stopped, Fort Totten Reservation, and up in Canada at Sioux Valley and on into northern Alberta. But we came in, and so they herded us up. And the 7th Cavalry, which had been defeated in 1876, at Custer's sensitivity training session, the United States and its military forces hold immense grudges. You saw what happened at Fallujah. They started assassinating the leadership. First Sitting Bull, then Crazy Horse. The last to come in to the reservations and give up their arms. Well, there was a Indian leader who was euphemistically called Bigfoot in English. He had his people. Well, the leaders were being, to his mind, systematically assassinated. He headed south with his band of people to come to Pine Ridge and come under the protection of Red Cloud, another leader who defeated the United States Army in 1868. And he got the Fort Laramie Treaty. He was stopped. They had no weapons, because on the reservation, they took away your weapons. It's just like going to prison. They take away your weapons. So we didn't have bows and arrows, I don't think. We had knives. But anyway, they were stopped right up here on top of the hill from my ranch. And there's a sign up there on the way to Wounded Knee. They were stopped up there. They were searched and all of that kind of stuff, disarmed of everything, and then forced to come down. This is the 7th Cavalry, who still were mad about what happened to them before, even though they deserved it, more so, in fact. Their story, and the Army has to claim this, otherwise they're liable. We're the people who defeated militarily the United States of America, who had built up a string of forts through 3 states. And we burnt every one of those. He gave them up because we militarily defeated them. Now we're in this bowl, Wounded Knee Bowl, surrounded by the armed might of the United States of America, and we're going to pull out one gun with our women and children and fire a shot. That's what they claim. And people believe it because we're Indians and we don't have a brain. Unlike Americans who have brains but don't use them. They slaughter us, men, women, and children. And then the blizzard hits, and they bury, after the blizzard goes by, all the bodies are frozen. And that infamous picture of Chief Bigfoot frozen in a horrible way, his body. Then they stack us up. This is before the Nazis and the concentration camps. They stack them up, all our bodies along by this mass grave, and they all take pictures and then shove them into the mass grave. 1969, we were demonstrating at Mount Rushmore. We went into the tourist shop at Mount Rushmore, and on this whole thing, a coat of postcards where they colored in these black and white pictures of the massacre at Wounded Knee, all the dead bodies, and the pictures of the mass grave and everything. It was, like the Jews. And they colored it in Technicolor. And they were selling these postcards. Oh, we're on vacation. Wish you were here. Love, That's what you put on these grotesque pictures of Indian people. Well, unbeknownst to the rest of the world, the death squads were originated and birthed right here on the Pine Ridge Sioux Indian Reservations. The death squads that eventually the United States exported to El Salvador and now Colombia and other Central and South American countries, you know? Those death squads that they used. Well, the first one was here. And what they did was arm and supply and train a goon squad. A goon squad of Oglalas who were under the personal guidance and protection of the president of the Oglala Sioux tribe, the reservation. He was the lackey the U.S. government used. So we learned the hard way, just like our ancestors, you know? You can't believe a white man. They lie, especially if they work for the government. Over 260 court cases, and we won every one of them. Once we were inside Wounded Knee, we reformed the independent Oglala Nation. We reinstituted our philosophy of life. And it ruled by unanimous consent, and we kept everything here. We had to. We were surrounded. But it's just an example of local control. If you have local control of the economics, if you have local control of the foodstuffs, if you have local control of your travel and transportation, you have freedom. And your freedom to act as neighbors. You know, you don't need government because you have each other. It's a simple way of life, but I guess it's too profound for Americans. So I'm reminded of where I stand constantly, even in Hollywood. You know, when you're a writer and you're going to write something, all responsible writers research it. You write a script, you're going to write about gangsters, you do some research on gangsters. You don't just make it up. And you do research on labor movements, whatever the topic, on love. Except when it comes to Indian. Script writers do no research. I know. I've confronted them. I've acted in some of their TV and movies. So I know where my people stand in America, you know? But this is my land. I love it. So I love this land, and I'm sad to see it's my duty as a Lakotah to welcome human beings. So that's why I fight for this country. That's why I fight for the Constitution. That's because I see too many wounded knees. The Branch Davidians, it's a white man's wounded knee, you know? When Clinton, a Democrat, attacked his own people and slaughtered them. Wow. Never stops, does it? And then they're demonized. And you know what they went to prison for? Those that survived that Holocaust? Illegal possession of firearms. Well, you know, because of what the United States did with Indian people, America then became the role model subsequently for Hitler's treatment of gypsies and Jews and Poles and gays and homosexuals. And then South Africa adopted the reservation system and apartheid because of the example of the United States. This is all written history because Hitler wrote about it when he was still in Austria. So that United States of America knows how to treat the lesser human being. I forget how he put it, with the human beings that do not deserve equitable treatment. So, unfortunately for the other peoples that suffer, America was the role model for concentration camps. This land now filled with Indians that are absolutely dependent on the government for everything. For everything! At any rate, you depend on the government, and what you'll end up with is poverty and a lot of paper. Because everything you do, the government requires a lot of paper. You have to fill out a lot of forms. Then they have to fill out a lot of forms. And then they go up to the next level of government, they got to fill out a lot of forms. And by the time it gets to where it's supposed to go, nothing happens. We have government health here. Our life expectancy, if you don't count AIDS, is the lowest in the world. Here. We are worse off than people in Haiti. Not only physically, but of the heart, our spirit, our reason to live. No, you don't want the government taking care of you. I do not speak untruths. Our land held in trust by the federal government, so we can't get loans, so we can't get businesses. That's some more paperwork you have to apply for. Our casino, the money goes first to the Bureau of Indian Affairs, then we have to write proposals to utilize the money. It's a never-ending cycle of poverty, dependency on the government. And in order for you to get ahead, you have to be like a congressman. You have to take bribes. You have to steal money, taxpayers' money. So America is no different than this Indian reservation. You're dependent on the government now, and you're getting what you deserve. But every time you try to get away from the government, they'll kill you. Or put you in prison. Or let you become an American. If you catch my drift. Because you're the new Indian. You're the new American Indian. Congratulations. Welcome to the club. But this land is beautiful. It belongs to us. And we should learn to take care of it by fighting for her. She's worth it. And so are we.
Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the sites, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.